good morning, and welcome everyone to our studio. We are back to Cloud Launch and Learn session today. We are going to have a very interesting topic today that's going to uncover a new GA, new global available service, API Center, and we are going to talk more about that. But before starting our session with our very valuable guest, I want to thank you everyone for joining our session. And I want to remind you that on our YouTube channel, you can support Cloud Launch and Learn. And we are also planning to make some more cloud marathoner type of style events coming up. We are planning for it. So any support that you provide is welcome. So today we have a special guest. Let's invite him to the studio.
Hi everyone.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good, and you?
Doing well, thank you. So Mike is joining from Netherlands. Maybe you guys remember him from previous sessions in Cloud, Launch and Learn. And hey Mike, so what type of session are you planning to present today?
Basically today we will be doing a discovery session of one of the newest services within the Azure portal called Azure API Center.
Yes. Awesome. So, without any overdue, I want to give back this, session to you and make sure that you feel comfortable to start. So, all
Yep.
stage is yours. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks, man. Okay, guys. So thank you all for joining basically this session. As I mentioned before, we will be discovering Azure API Center. Not sure if many of you already know that service within the Azure Cloud because it's very new. It's went GA on the 1st of May. So things may get new for you. If you are thinking that we are going to talk about Azure API management, we are not going to talk about Azure API management. There is some kind of integration, but we will not touch on the service itself. But let me first do a little bit more introduction if you do not already know me as well. I'm the CTO at 350. 350 is a consultancy company in the Netherlands where we deliver a lot of knowledge to our customers. Next to that, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, so I also deliver certified trainings modules for Microsoft within the organization and outside the organization as well. I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP, and I'm the founder of the Dutch Cloud Meetup. That's a small meetup group we had in the Netherlands as well. But let me basically get to the problem we may all have and we may see within large organizations as well. That's basically where I want to set the stage with you guys. So basically, we are talking about APIs. Maybe you do not know it, maybe you do know it. It stands for Application Programming Interface, where you can have integrations between different applications, different teams, different platforms as well. And what we see nowadays is that a lot of organizations have a lot of APIs, meaning that we all have a lot of endpoints that we can connect to and where we can create services, create accounts, create organizations, you name it. Basically, all applications we nowadays use, especially when there are SaaS applications, they all have APIs. And we really do not know anymore what we can use, which APIs are there. We build our own applications, but do our applications have APIs? Can we connect to our internal applications or maybe have other endpoints we can connect to? So basically what you see coming is an API sprawl of APIs within organizations where we do not know anymore what works, how it works, and what the definitions are. So basically what we see happening within those organizations is that we are not able to discover APIs and we are not able to reuse them as well. So what we see on a practical basis from day to day on, we see developers within an organization that think, okay, let me create an API. Let me create an API to create accounts. Maybe a few months later, someone else, we do not have an API to create accounts. Let me create one. So they really don't know about each other and what they have built in previous stages. So it's really a poor discoverability of those APIs. And basically what this service will do is will allow you to reuse those APIs as well. Next to that, when it's not discoverable, um, basically the APIs live in the shadow and are ungoverned. So we do not know about them, so do not know the risk, and that's basically also the potential security threat that we have here. We do not know the risk. We do not know how it's created and how it's governed as well. And basically the last point is having a lot of APIs and not having a way to discover them. You will also notice that a lot of these APIs will not be consistent with each other. So you get a lot of inconsistent APIs where you may want to work within an organization to a consistent standard of how you create APIs, how you work with them, and how do you handle them. So we have now seen a lot of problems. So let's now try to deep into a part of the solution. And later on during this demonstration and presentation, you will notice why I call it part of the solution. Because from a professional perspective, I'm not sure if that's the perspective for Microsoft as well, I do not think that this is the complete solution. And you will see later on why I do not see this as a complete solution later on as well. So, as mentioned before, Azure API Center is a brand new service within the platform. Not mistaken, May 1st GA. Um, from a professional perspective as well, not everything works as great as you want. So there are still some slight things that needs to be done, but it's a real nice uh, component. So how can you imagine what we have? Basically, what you can see here in this image, and you will see this image as well if you later on go to the Learn documentation of Microsoft. We have an organization and we have environments, we have deployments with a lot of APIs. So at the top of this picture, you can see the API producers. Those API producers can use ASP.NET, Node, Fast API. They can use any kind of technique they want. They can use any type of framework as well. And basically, they deploy them within the cloud environment or maybe even an on-premise environment, right, as well. And they can be hosted in Kubernetes, API management, for example, web apps, container apps, but also in Azure Functions. And for these APIs, you mainly have also some DTA structure. So you have your development environment where you have API 1 and 2. You have your testing environment where you have some different APIs. And then moving on to your production environments where you maybe only have 1 or 2 APIs already in production. And maybe also some different versions there as well. So there you have also the API platform engineer, so that you can see on the right side as well, where they specify best practices and standards, security policy and compliance policies as well, and where you can have tools to have that integrated view. So we will move on top of that as well, as API Center also has some extensibility within Visual Studio Code to make sure that you have some governance insights and some other insights as well. And what you see at the bottom where you have the API consumers is where you can see that we have API Center, which basically has a web-based portal where you can see which APIs we have, what kind of documentations there is in that service, and how you can work with that APIs as well. So now in the next couple of slides, we will move basically around the capabilities of Azure API Center so that you can have some insights. Okay, what kind of service is it? How does it look? What kind of functionalities do we have? And basically, after those introductions, I will give you a demonstration on how it looks, how you can create it, how you can place APIs in there, and also look in already some part of automation where you can use Bicep to create the service as well. So API Center basically offers the capabilities of specifying APIs, where it really does not matter which kind of technology or language you use, if you have a specific endpoint that delivers some kind of messages. So you could also have an Azure function that has an HTTP trigger that you can use and leverage within API Center. Besides that, there are several types you can integrate there as well. The most used API types are available already, and basically the runtime, like I mentioned before, does not impact API Center. At last, it offers API governance, so you can have real insights on your APIs and maybe what you need to change in APIs as well. But it also helps you if you integrate it with, for example, the Visual Studio Code extension in getting more insights in breaking changes within the APIs. So if we then look at, okay, what does it really offers me any more than just a layer on top of my APIs where I can see which APIs I have, which versions it has. It has a complete structure around it where you can specify metadata on those APIs and also on your environments so that you can really easier filter down through your complete set of APIs. So to give you the direct, correct information in what kind of API do I need to use for this, what kind of API do I need to use for this. And also it has environment specifications so that you can see which API is deployed on which environment, may it be a development environment or production environment, and also can see which versions of an API are deployed to a specific location, so that you also are also aware of at the time at looking at the service where a specific definition version lies within your environment. So basically, if I'm testing with the 1.1 version and I still have the 1.0 in production, of course. So that's really specified within the portal to give you some good insights on all those applications. So one of the major topics I think that really makes API Center for me a service to look at and to see how I can use that service within different organizations I work with. It's basically the part where we can use API governance on top of my APIs, where we are able to apply standards, processes, and policies all together on my APIs to make sure that we can track our APIs, that we can track the versions, that we can track the deployments, see where all my APIs are living within the organization and within my data center, and ensuring all APIs are designed to conform to standards within the organization. And basically also delivering you the option to in timely fashion detect the API versions that may have breaking changes, so that you have a more better and gradual rollout to your API consumers and make sure that each endpoint that leverages an API really works for all the API consumers. Mentioning this is basically one of the big parts in the complete puzzle that's in there for your API management, for API Center. And that's why I also call it a piece in the puzzle, because by default, and that's basically now by default, so I hope that they are moving to a different way of integrating that as well. This part of governance is not completely filled into the Azure API Center, but you require different services to get those statements, the governance capabilities in your service itself. By default, it uses Spectral to check the governance of your API. So what you can see here in the middle, we have Azure API Center. And basically, Azure API Center is the place where you save your definitions and maintain them as well. So you maintain the versions there and everything else. And on top of that, in the Azure Cloud, there runs a function that checks, based on specific rule sets, what the governance and compliance is of your service. So basically, the complete Azure function rollout is set in a different Azure service. That's basically just an Azure function that runs on events within the platform. So basically, that happens when you have a new API, you imported API in Azure API Center, basically adding or updating an API in API Center, delivers an event, and that event that triggers an Azure function. That Azure function checks your API definition based on spectral rule set. By default, it uses, of course, spectral rule set as well. And basically, that information that's coming out from the check is sent back to Azure API Center. This makes sure that you can comply with specific guidelines, and you can also pick up that spectral rule set and add additional rules, define additional rules, or you could just use the default version, of course, as well. So this is basically what I've mentioned. You have the API guidelines, and by default, it's the spectral rule set. So you get, and I will show you that later on as well. You have some entry points where you can go to be able to deploy these services, and then you can create your own rule set. And basically everything else is also available in the Visual Studio Code extension. So basically there is a Visual Studio Code extension that you could use on top of your APIs, and basically where you're developing your APIs. But you could also use that Visual Studio Code extension for discoverability. So you are able to discover your APIs. Which APIs do we have? You are able to try them out as well. You could view the documentation. You could also generate SDKs from there as well. There are even components in there with additional extensions to even create C# applications or HTML applications to leverage your APIs, really giving you a starting point for your application to get started and everything else. So next I have, basically it's a screenshot of API Center portal. So basically this is the API Center portal that you get. I would say combined with Azure API Center, but that's not completely true, and I will show you that later on why that is as well. And basically this gives you, your API readers, a good insight in which APIs I have and how I can work with them. But I will give you some more insights on that later on as well, so that you completely know what I mean when having a piece of the puzzle as well. So let's do some demos, and that's basically the best part of this as well, is that I can show you a lot of these functionalities already directly from the Azure portal, but there are still some minor bugs in there. So we will touch upon those bugs as well. So let me just move to my browser, and I forgot to open the Azure portal as well. So let me just log into the Azure portal. Let me sign on with the correct account. Sorry for this.
No, you're good, Mike. So when you present your Visual Studio Code, can you make it a little bit bigger on the screen?
Course,
It's like, thank you. All right.
I will. Let me do the multi-factor authentication. 2, 4. So basically, this is my Azure environment. It's a completely Azure environment with a couple of subscriptions, where I have some stuff laying around. So if I move over to the subscriptions, I'm going to move over to this subscription. And in this subscriptions, I have a couple of resource groups. Basically now I have 3 resource groups in this subscription available. And basically I use this subscription to build upon my demos and demonstrations. And we will first go to the second one in the list, and basically that's the MVP RG Center PRD, and I will just pop it already, not to be zooming every time. So in this resource group, I have a lot of resources already, because I also have some hosted APIs in here. So basically I have an API 01, 02, and some additional resources to host the APIs, and also have application insights to have some insights on my APIs and the use of my APIs, of course, and of course the service plans. But where we are most interested in is basically this service called API Center -PRD. and that's basically of the type API Center. So basically, this is the service we are talking about. This is Azure API Center. So if we move this open already, we can see a couple of things already. So we have a pricing plan that's set to standard. So basically, at this point, there are two pricing plans. One is free, and that's basically free for 90 days, if I'm not mistaken. And the other one is standard, meaning that on the standard plan, you pay about $699 a month. Not completely sure, but I think that's the correct amount you are paying for this service. And next to that, you have a lot of options in the menu already, with additional functionalities that you can use within API Center. So like I've mentioned before, you have options to structure and filter your data, and that's basically based on the metadata you give to your APIs. So by default, there is a starting set of metadata already built into the service, and you will see those later on as well. But you are also able to create your own metadata options. So for example, I've added a couple of metadata options where I have an owner, an API approver, and basically a metadata saying if this service is a public facing API. And it's very easy to create additional metadata where you just give it the title and identification and also the type. So you also have some additional options to maybe have an object as a type and give that object additional resources as well. So you can have very fine-grained metadata available for your services to work further with, and also maybe build upon additional automation. So basically, with the API approver, you have options to build upon the events within Azure API Center to, for example, do an approval of an API release. Then let's move over to the environments. So you can, in Azure API Center, you can define environments, and basically those environments specify where you want to deploy your APIs. So in this example, I only have one environment, very easily named production, and you also have a type. So this also lets you see on which type of service you are being deploying. And if you, for example, if we just move one back, do a new environment, you can see that you have the environment. On the metadata, I can also specify if I want that metadata specifically available on my environment, so that you can also have additional data in there on having that environment available. And in the server type, you now have, for example, a list of additional services available that you could use. So you can already see here the main used services in the Azure platform and some additional APIs that you can specify here as the environment where the APIs live. Now, basically going to the fun part of it all. Oh, that's one too low. And that's basically the APIs part. In the APIs part, you specify which APIs you have. So in this example, we have two APIs. I have used the simple C# weather forecast API, and I also have an API called to-do items. That's also basically just a C# representation for an API. And basically an API itself, of course, has a type, has a specific lifecycle, so that you can also do lifecycle management within your APIs. It has some summary and a description. And you could also leverage external documentation. So if I have external documentation about this API, I can specify the documentation here so that you are able to link to it from different locations. So you can imagine that on the self-hosted portal I've just shown a screenshot from, you could have a link to that external documentation as well. So you also see the other specified metadata here, which one is the API approver, which one is the owner, and also if it's publicly available. Drilling down into basically the API itself, You can also see the deployments, where you, for example, could also see, hey, which kind of deployments do I have? So I can add in a new deployment here, for example. So if I would have a secondary production environment or a testing environment, it's very easy to create one. So if I would say, let me weather forecast. Okay. And that's an internet hiccup.
Hmm. So we'll get the mic back. Probably there was a hiccup on his laptop. Once the speaker joins back to our studio, I'll bring him. But it looks like there was some issue either on his system or something. Get slow down. It can be network connectivity as well. So we'll continue this session. So please keep with us. It's just a technical issue, I believe, uh, on the presenter side that he's working through at the moment. But we are waiting for Mike. But meanwhile, when Mike presented about API Center, its features, as you know, it's a GA recently. Uh, it actually started the preview recently. If you have any questions about the API Center while we are waiting for Mike to join back to the studio, please bring it out. Okay. All right, Mike, you are back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yes.
I'm not sure
Yeah,
what
yeah. I saw
happened
there
there,
was a
but
glitch. I just told this, audience, hey, don't go anywhere. Mike is coming. I'm pretty sure he will connect back. So if you wanna bring back the presenting, view,
yeah,
I will bring it to the studio as well. Yeah,
yeah,
no issues. That's the what happens in live demo, right? So you saw real
yeah. It's
live demo.
I really. This is
That's how it
basically
works.
it's the first time I had this because I had
Yeah,
never had this glitch, but it's nice to have a glitch sometimes. So let me
that's
just oh, entire screen,
true.
and then let me check the correct screen. That's this one.
Yes, I see it. I brought it back. So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
back
there's
view.
the ESG portal
Yeah.
again. So
All right.
maybe
Cool.
I hope it now works a little bit longer than it did before. But yeah, let's move back to Azure API Center because everything was closed on my side as well because the complete browser just froze for a couple of seconds. So basically, we were at the APIs. Um, if we go to those APIs, what I would wanted to show you is that you can very easily add an additional deployment. So if we would call this weather forecast test, you can just specify a test environment. We could even create a new environment. And I think you get the point is that it's very easy to maintain. It also contains your runtime URL, so you also know where to find it as well. And it gives you a lot of insights on where your APIs live. So for example, if we would open up this deployment runtime, we can just click it open. We see that it could not be found because it needs an additional weather forecast. And you see that it works as well. So you have a lot of capabilities and a whole lot of information already present for your APIs. And one of the most important things I think that it's there is that you have also some versions in there as well. And that's basically very important because, as you may know, a lot of APIs have a lot of versioning, have a lot of different versions. So you need to know which capabilities are in a specific version and which are not. So you're able to upload and add your own versions of your metadata. So basically, this is just a definition of an open API spec where you just see that I have some small operations in there as well. Um, then moving back to the governance part and the other stuff as well is basically you have now seen the main components of Azure API Center, and then you have the part where you have some API analysis. And that's basically the governance part of this complete solution. And that's also something um, that that there are problems with at this point. Is normally, and that's basically also specified in this part of the text as well, is if you want to have automatically checks against the industry standards, ensuring your API is not a functional best practice for great reliability. Deployment of an Azure API function app is required to run linting function. How do I analyze APIs using a linting rules? Basically, this brings you to a page that's also on the learn.microsoft.com, where you can see the same image I've showed you already, and that basically shows you how this works. Everything together goes to a GitHub project. Let me just .com / and that's the portal one. That's this project, and that's basically where this functionality is maintained. So it's very easy for you to get started because you can just clone this project, and using the Azure Developer CLI, you can just type in AZD up, and it basically deploys all the services for you in the Azure platform, and also make a configuration in Azure API Center and also in your function to basically do and to do the analysis. And this project also contains the spectral rule set that I was referring about. So you are able to even adjust the rule sets if you want. So you can make a differentiation here, and you can just get started with these resources. And what have I done within this environment? Basically, what I did in this environment as well, because I want to build a good demonstration for you, and I'm not able to show any client information. I've also, of course, deployed the function, and basically this is what you get. You get a function with application insights and everything else. In this function, you have a specific function itself, and that's called the, if it loads, the API Center Analyzer, and it basically has a trigger to the event grid. So with this function, all your APIs are checked, and what normally is the case, and I can show you that now as well in this live demo because we have the time. If we go to Azure API Center, Azure API Center has specific events, and that's basically where the function works on. We can do an event subscription addition. We have to give that a name, of course. So let me just call it API Center, and then governance. That's based on the event grid schema. It needs to go to a specific topic, and then you can select when I want to run the analysis. So you can do that on API edit and API updated. Those are the two most known events. You can check the Azure function, and then on this side, we can choose the specific function, and then it automatically fills in everything. So I can confirm the selection. It could be the case that it now succeeds. Oh, if we click on create as well, because I know I've spoken to someone in the program team as well. They are aware of this issue, and it will be fixed. So it will be approximately tomorrow, as they are gradually rolling it out to different Azure subscriptions, of course, because that's basically a long process. So I've checked this morning, and did it work? Maybe it now works, but I don't think so, because this action will give you an error back saying that it was a bad request on the back end. Yeah, and there it is. So basically, you are not at this moment able to try and test this governance functionality out, but it should work tomorrow. And basically, I would advise you to really check this out and see which governance rules are coming from your APIs, so that you will be able to create better APIs and also are better to maintain those APIs as well. Then moving to the other part, and that's also a part of the puzzle, of course. So we have talked about the self-hosted portal, and that's basically just a web portal that drives on information that's in API Center. So basically you specify all your services in API Center, and then you will have a portal where you can send your end users to, and able to view the information and see which kind of services there are. So that's basically where we have the other research group called MVPRG Portal Sandbox. And this is basically just a static web app. So if I would open the static web app, let me just get the URL. You can see that it's at this point it's completely empty, and that's true as well because you still need to sign in, because this is basically just an open portal. You need to sign in to view the APIs. So if I sign in, yeah, this account, normally you would see all your APIs at this point, and that's basically, as I've mentioned before, in this portal there's also a small issue that they still need to fix. And basically normally, as the screenshot that I showed before, you would be able to see all your APIs where you can click on the APIs and move forward. Next to that, you also see the filter information. So in my portal as well, you see already the filter information. You also have the lifecycle information. So I can filter on basically what kind of services I'm looking for. So basically this whole puzzle together with basically a 3-piece puzzle is a really good service that helps you in leveraging your API. But I think there's still a fourth piece as well. And basically the fourth piece in this is the Visual Studio Code extension. So as you can see here, I have installed the Visual Studio Code API Center extension. And with this extension, if I click it open, I can navigate to a specific API Center. And based on the credentials I have within the Azure extension, and in there, I can just see directly from my IDE which APIs do I have, which versions of definitions are in here, what is the version, what are the specific deployments. So I can click this completely open to see all the other deployments as well, even for the weather forecast. I even can open the environment itself. What's even more interesting, if I just click open the 1.0 definition, I can export the specification documentation, so I can just get the open API specification, but I can do a lot of more things. I can do a generate API documentation, and then I can, what you can see here, I can see the specific methods. And this basically also uses the Kyoda extension within Visual Studio Code. And from there on, I can just click the play button. Let me call this test Cloud Launch Learn API test SDK. And just call it do it tests CL. So this is basically just some informational, and then I can just choose one of the language types that I would like to specify for my service. So for example, if I'm a PHP developer, I would like to have the PHP version, but let me just use the C# one because I'm a real C# developer. It now works in the background, and you see that the generation of this TDD client for C# has been completed. So if I now go to the folder, and that's basically the test.cl folder, I can just see complete C# reference of how I need to work with my service as well. So I have the to-do items, I have an item, you have the request builders in there. So it's a complete client already for you to work with the APIs, making it very easy for you to discover and work with the APIs itself. But you also could generate an HTTP file, really giving you some simple HTTP definitions. And you can open the API documentation, and that basically just gives you the Swagger representation of your API, where you're also available, of course, of doing some testing capabilities as well. So you can just try the correct API in here as well. So this basically, all those parts of the puzzle together give you a good solution of making your APIs discoverable within your organization, but also giving developers that use your APIs within the organization a good starting point and a good governance metrics to learn on the APIs as well. To give you some more insights, for example, in let me any governance and basically the linting it does. So basically we have the specification. This is basically one of the specifications we have, and those are basically also governance rules that will come out into Azure API Center when the function works. And basically this is what you can see in the problems tab within the palette of Visual Studio Code, where you can see that there are some specific things, specific warnings that are already in my API that you preferably need to fix. So this is basically some representation of information that you will also be getting into Azure API Center if the governance part works. And that should be operational tomorrow again to configure. So basically clients that already have this running were not affected. It's only for setting up new instances as well. So moving back to the slides and having a short conclusion. I think you already heard me say it already. It's a great service. It's part of the puzzle. And you need to be aware of the fact that you have to put the puzzle pieces together and not only look at Azure API Center, but also look at the portal and also look at the analyzer and getting that up and running. And what I haven't showed you, let me just show you that very quickly. Next to the analyzer, that's also a GitHub project from Microsoft as well. You also have a same kind of project for the portal, and it's also called Portal Starter. So it's really a starter project, and this is basically also what I've deployed to my Azure environment. But from the source code, you were not able to get the problem fixed to get the APIs viewable. So there's also an issue logged in here as well. And basically this portal gets you starting in setting up that portal. It's completely customizable. So for your organization, you can place on your logos, you can place on your colors, you can fully customize this portal already and leverage the visibility and discoverability of your APIs within your organization. So it really gets you starting in getting your APIs discoverable within your organization without your developers having to go to the Azure API Center in the Azure portal. So that basically also concludes the conclusion. Make sure that you have all parts of the puzzles in place for your organization. So it may be for your organization that you will not use the portal, but you will use the analyzer. Make sure that you have all those puzzle pieces in your mind and see what works for your organization, how you want to use it. Then, of course, I want to share some resources with you. So we have that analyzer. That's basically just a project on the GitHub portal. That's the same for the portal itself. Within learn.microsoft.com, there's already a lot of information on API Center. And also, of course, a link to the extension. And what I also want to touch upon, and I totally forgot that in my demo, so let's just move back as we still have time, is everything is great. We can create Azure API Center through the portal. That's very easy. Just click, go. But of course, there's also some automation around it. And you could just use bicep files to create your API Center. So let me just go to the module section where we have API Center and move to the main part. So what you can see here is basically just a small part of bicep. I'm not sure if everyone in this meeting is already aware of bicep, but it's just basically an evolution of ARM that we had for the Azure platform, where you can just very easily create an API Center service. Basically creating the service itself that you can see on line 31 to 38 is very easy. Just give it a name, give it a location, give it this queue. Basically, this queue can be free or standard. Those are basically the two queues that are there at this moment. Um, One thing there is if you start off doing this via Bicep, it will not tell you to add this queue. It's not required. It by default will go to free, if I'm not mistaken. But if you then do a redeployment, it will say, hey, you have to supply a queue. So that's why this queue is in there, because I have deployed it multiple times to do some additional configurations. And next to that, you can create an API Center workspace. And that's basically just the place where you will save um, the APIs. And basically what we see here is that we have a specific API Center title and a specific description. And then, of course, you're also able to upload APIs and save APIs within Azure API Center. So if we, let me just scroll this down, do a little bit of zooming. What you can see here is that in a workspace, we save an API. So we specify the parent. In this example, the parent is, of course, the workspace. We give it a name, we specify the type, and we can give it some external documentation links. So as you can see here, I have some external documentation, I have some context and some custom properties. So you can fully leverage this in your deployment cycles, where you can imagine that when a developer team creates an API, they build pipelines to be able to deploy that API, but you can also tell them to, okay, so if you deploy those APIs, I also want you to make sure that every piece of the puzzle of information is also delivered to Azure API Center. So making sure that they create the bicep to deploy your API in Azure API Center, so that it's directly discoverable and attached to the right environment. So that everyone is aware of which APIs are there in your organization. Because it's not just deploying Azure API Center, you also need to make sure that you gather all APIs and make sure that they are in the same portal available, of course. So if you want to get started, take a look at the resources. It's very easy to get started with. Just do the deployments of the specific items. Mainly look at the analyzer, because that's a real cool functionality. And if you start building your APIs, make sure that you also use the API Center Visual Studio Code extension to get started. And that basically leaves me with thanking you for being at this presentation. If you want to have some additional information, if you have some additional questions, you can reach out to me via LinkedIn, via Twitter, or X, how we call it nowadays. You can find me on my website, and you can even send me an email if you want. Next to that, basically what I've shown you within Visual Studio Code, all my testing material is on GitHub. So if you go to my GitHub account /Mike van der Gaag, you can find there a project called API Center, MSFT minus API Center, and there you can find all the example data as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for presentation, Mike.
No
Yeah, I
problem.
also put some of those links on our chat for the people
Cool.
who are on the YouTube, so they should be able to access it. But this slide is very important, so take a picture of it, or you can later on watch as well. But I would recommend take the picture, screenshot, so that you can have the context. I think it was awesome presentation, even though we had some glitch on the portal, right, when you were trying to create one, and you explained that it's a known issue, which is actually very good, because if somebody is going to try it and they're seeing some glitch, so they know that there's something going on behind development, and the Azure team is working to improve that service. I would just mention something, right? Because the API Center is new. Is this service available all across any Azure region, or there are like choose and pick regions in Azure where users need to use that to provision?
I think, I'm not sure if that's the right. Yeah, I think it's now more or less in 5 regions.
Okay,
Not completely sure,
all right.
but it's in the main known regions. It's available.
Okay, all right, Good. So yeah, if you don't see that in your like specific region, which is not one of those, and what we mean by main is like East US, West US. I think they are the one of the main
Yeah,
ones.
West Europe.
And yes, that's the regions where it comes first. But if you are picking some different region and you don't see it, just you know, choose the one of those commonly used regions so you can see this service, because I'm pretty sure it's not deployed to everywhere. Microsoft is still working on that service. And uh, that's awesome to know that there are like GitHub resources that Mike shared, where you can look into how to get started with API Center, and as well as like Portal, and as well as how to get started with the analyzer, API Center analyzer. All right, so I think you did. It was a great again demo. We looked into the Visual Studio Code extensions that you used, and I don't have any question in the studio at the moment, but people are going to watch this video on our Cloud Launch and Learn, YouTube channel later on. Uh, and again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Mike, for presentation.
No
Any
problem.
last words to our audience that you want to say before we finish the session?
No, I just want to thank everyone again for joining this session, and
Yes.
I
All
hope
right.
that wins tonight.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So Netherlands is playing tonight. Eyes on the game. Good
Yeah.
luck, Netherlands and everyone. See you all. Thank you, Mike, again. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.